Thank you. Mr. Hurst, drag you into the conversation here. We have not yet received from the Pentagon the costs of the war. So just for the record, we'd like to get that as soon as possible. Certainly the munitions expended, but also underreported is we've had a fair amount of equipment destroyed, including 2 C-130s with the rescue of our downed airmen. So do you have either A, a cost estimate coming to us anytime soon, or B, a specific supplemental request?
Thank you for that question. So approximately at this day, we're spending about $25 billion on Operation Epic Fury. Most of that is in munitions. There's part of that is obviously O&M and equipment replacement. We will formulate a supplemental through the White House that will come to Congress once we have a full assessment of the cost of the conflict.
Sure. So you're saying the full cost at this point is $25 billion?
Yeah, that's our estimate for the cost.
Okay. Interesting, because I'm glad you answered that question, because we've been asking for a hell of a long time and no one's given us the number. So if you could get those details over to us, that would be great. Mr. Secretary, you mentioned the nuclear aspect of Iran and the war. And it is worth noting that every president prior to this one, including President Trump in his first term, also prevented Iran from getting a nuclear weapon without actually having to go to war in Iran. So we need to keep that in mind. But also, since the war started, Iran's nuclear arsenal has not been weakened in any way. And at the moment, in negotiations, what Iran is saying, basically pay us to open up the strait. That's their position, which is completely untenable. I agree. It's worth noting, of course, that the strait was open before the war started. Now we're negotiating to get back to status quo. And Iran's most recent offer is to say, we'll talk about nukes later. So what is the plan to actually turn all of this lethal kinetic action into an improvement in the nuclear situation? Because we haven't gotten there yet. Play it out for us. How does that happen? How does it actually lead to that result?
Well, I would take issue with the premise of the question that nothing was done. Operation Midnight Hammer was a very effective.
Well, I didn't say nothing was done. I said in this war.
Ultimately,
this war started.
Well, under this administration, unlike other administrations, which cut bad deals and pallets of cash with no ability to oversee whether Iran is actually pursuing a nuclear program.
Which is where
we want to litigate JCPOA or the Iran deal. Our view, the president's view, is that was a very bad deal.
Okay.
It gave them a bunch of money up front.
What's the future?
To fund, you talked about negotiated deals. Allowed them to fund their proxies and spread Hamas and Hezbollah all around the region, build up nuclear capabilities.
That's great. What are we going to do now?
President Trump has been clear-eyed, from the killing of Qasem Soleimani to the pulling out of the Iran deal to Midnight Hammer and now to this effort to recognize that you have to stare down this kind of enemy who's hell-bent on getting a nuclear weapon and get them to a point where they're at the table giving it up in a way that ensures they never have it.
So they haven't broken yet. Okay, we haven't gotten there yet for all of the.
Well, their nuclear facilities have been obliterated. Underground, they're buried, and we're watching them 24/7. So we know where any nuclear material
reclaiming
might be.
My time for
just
a quick second here. We had to start this war, you just said, 60 days ago, because the nuclear weapon was an imminent threat. Now you're saying that it was completely obliterated?
They had not given up their nuclear ambitions, and they had a conventional shield of thousands of missiles.
So Operation Midnight Hammer accomplished nothing of substance. It left us at exactly the same place we were before. So much so that
their facilities were bombed and obliterated. Their ambitions continued, and they're building a conventional shield.
Let me try again.
It's the North Korea strategy. You know this very well. The North Korea strategy was use conventional missiles to prevent anybody from challenging them so they could slow walk their way to a weapon. President Trump saw Iran at its weakest moment, took an action to ensure, in a way that only the United States of America could do with our Israeli partners,
and yet
to ensure their conventional shield was brought
one
to
other
heel,
question,
which we've done.
If I could get to it. So on Ukraine, a year plus ago, your advice, the president's advice, was Ukraine had no cards to play. They should go cut the best possible deal they could. Clearly that was wrong. What did you miss? What did you miss about the conflict between Russia and Ukraine that you didn't see that Ukraine was going to be capable of doing what they've done in the last 14 months?
What we didn't miss, and we're here in this committee, is that Joe Biden, with no accountability, gave hundreds of billions of dollars of our weapons to Ukraine, to an outcome that never would have happened if President Trump was president. So he pulled out our – you guys don't talk about that. Ultimately, President Trump believes there should be a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. But
you didn't expect Ukraine to be where they're at right now. I'm asking you, just from a strategic standpoint, what
I think the Ukrainians
miss?
have shown great courage, and I appreciate that Europe is now paying for any weapons that we provide.
And one of the big questions that we need to get answered today is, where is this going? What is the plan to achieve our objectives? We've seen the cost, and the cost is very, very high. All we keep hearing on the objectives is we keep seeing all of the targets that we have struck. And again, that is an incredible accomplishment from a tactical standpoint. I think the proficiency of our military has been on display, but we're not in this for a tactical advantage. We're in this to fundamentally change Iran. And as we sit here today, Iran's nuclear program is exactly what it was before this war started. They have not lost their capacity to inflict pain. They still have a ballistic missile program. They're still able to blockade the Strait of Hormuz and have the ships that are capable of doing that. What is the plan to get that to change? And most disturbingly, the president keeps telling us that it's over. What was it, a week ago Friday, the president announced that Iran had agreed to give up their nuclear program, to give up their ballistic missile program, to stop support for terrorist groups, to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. The only problem with that is literally none of that was true. He was completely making it up. It wasn't. Iran hadn't even agreed to meet with us, as became embarrassingly clear as the days spun out and poor J.D. Vance had to keep going back and forth to the airport. We never even had a meeting. So wish fulfillment is not really a strategy. I mean, maybe the president thinks he's doing some sort of Jedi mind trick and can tell Iran, you will give up your nuclear weapons, and they automatically will. But that's not working. So what we need to hear today is what is going to work. We have 50,000 troops in the region who are still at risk. How are those tactical victories going to translate into some sort of strategic success? And by the way, this is one of the things that realism recognizes. You can win a whole lot of little small battles and lose the war, which is why you don't stumble into the war in the first place. But at the same time, we're doing all of this on our own as we increasingly push away all of our allies. Sometimes just because we want to do what we want to do, we don't want to have to consult them. Sometimes just gratuitously insulting them. I mean, in the middle of this war where we were asking NATO to come join us, the president took time out to insult President Macron and his wife. Okay, how is that helping us to try and belittle everybody in the world? And I also, for the people who are criticizing NATO over this war, I will remind people that NATO is a defensive alliance. What that means is every country in it pledges to defend a country if attacked. And when we were attacked on 9/11, that's what NATO did. They put in Article 5, and for 20 years they fought beside us. NATO is not if any one of the countries decides to unilaterally and unwisely start a war precipitously that everyone else is supposed to join. That's not the way it works. So berating and belittling our allies after we did that and driving them ever further away from us, how is that realistic? Not only are we going to try to reshape the Middle East, but we're going to do it alone, while we're pushing everybody away from us.
The congressional hearing grew increasingly tense as lawmakers confronted Pentagon officials over the escalating conflict with Iran and the true cost of the war. One senator opened the exchange by criticizing the Defense Department for failing to provide Congress with a full financial assessment of the operation, including the cost of munitions and destroyed military equipment. Pentagon officials finally revealed that Operation Epic Fury has already cost the United States roughly $25 billion, with much of the spending tied to missile strikes, weapons systems, and replacement equipment following combat losses in the region. Lawmakers immediately questioned whether the administration has a clear long-term strategy beyond military strikes. The senator argued that while previous administrations, including President Donald Trump's first term, managed to contain Iran's nuclear ambitions without launching a major regional war, the current conflict has failed to produce meaningful strategic results. According to the senator, despite months of bombing campaigns and tactical victories, Iran still maintains its nuclear infrastructure, ballistic missile capabilities, and the ability to threaten the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most important oil shipping lanes. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth strongly defended the administration's actions, insisting that Operation Midnight Hammer dealt a devastating blow to Iran's underground nuclear facilities. Hegseth argued that the previous Iran nuclear deal, commonly known as the JCPOA, only strengthened Tehran by giving the regime financial resources that were later used to fund regional proxy groups like Hezbollah and Hamas. He maintained that President Trump's approach is designed to force Iran into abandoning its nuclear ambitions permanently through overwhelming pressure and military deterrence. However, the senator repeatedly pressed the administration on how these battlefield victories would actually translate into a lasting political solution. He argued that tactical success alone does not guarantee strategic victory, and warned that the United States risks becoming trapped in another prolonged Middle East conflict without a clear exit plan. The senator also criticized President Trump for publicly claiming Iran had already agreed to major concessions, including abandoning its nuclear program and reopening the Strait of Hormuz, even though negotiations had reportedly not even taken place. The hearing later expanded into a broader debate about America's global leadership and alliances. The senator accused the administration of isolating the United States by publicly attacking NATO allies while simultaneously asking for international support. He reminded the committee that NATO stood beside America after the September 11 attacks, and argued that weakening those alliances during a major global crisis undermines U.S. credibility abroad. Ukraine also became a major point of discussion during the hearing. The senator questioned why the administration previously underestimated Ukraine's ability to resist Russia, arguing that similar strategic miscalculations may now be happening in Iran. Hegseth defended the administration's position by criticizing the Biden administration's military aid policies and insisting that President Trump still supports a negotiated peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine. As the hearing came to close, lawmakers warned that the conflict with Iran continues to grow more dangerous, while nearly 50,000 American troops remain stationed across the region. Critics argued that military power alone cannot secure long-term stability, and stressed that diplomacy, alliances, and a clearly defined strategy are essential if the United States hopes to avoid a deeper and more costly regional war.